Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're back again with another new and exciting guest. Today, folks, we've got the curator of the Arcane YouTube channel. He's an author, an esoteric educator, and some might even say he has an occult following. Mr. Ike Baker, everybody, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, James. This is going to be great. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you.
Well, we were just briefly talking before, too, and I think just this has been a huge interest of mine, and it's always fun to find other people who are into this stuff and who really have done the research and can analyze the history. Just for the sake of my listeners, I want to point them immediately to your channel. Let me share my other screen here. You are the curator, again, of Arcane. Everyone, check this channel out. I recently just watched parts 1 and 2 of the history of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I loved. And I guess let's start with a brief intro of yourself, and let's talk about how you find yourself interested in these subjects. Sure.
Well, that's tough. I've been accused of being many things, but never brief. I will do my best. So I'm not just a researcher, and that's the thing that I want to let everybody know. I have been a member of initiatic orders for over a decade in some form. So I'm a Freemason. I am that will automatically turn a lot of people off to me. And I understand their reservations, but I can speak to it from the inside. I am a temple chief and an inner order member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I'm a practicing Martinist. I belong to several initiatic lineages. So I'm not just somebody who kind of understands the map. I know the territory, and that's part of the reason why I decided to start putting stuff out there. Is that you get a lot of people that have the map upside down or have learned the map by people who learn the map and are telling them how to interpret the map, and we've really got, I gotta say, truly the wrong end of the stick on a lot of this stuff. So I wanted to start producing material and also having conversations, right? Because part of the Arcanum, I guess, the overarching thing is podcasting. I sit down and have relatively concise, maybe an hour-long conversations with scholars, practitioners, esotericists, people that are in orders and things like that. And, you know, we will typically go pretty deep. Alchemists, astrologers, magicians, etc. And just make this stuff available, because the internet is really, it's a double-edged sword. You know, it's a double-edged sword. Anybody can get up there and start putting out content. And what's really interesting is at first, right, you try and keep a level head and you're like, fake news will only go so far. Well, I think we're living in a time where we realize, like, no, fake news is the headlines now. You know, it's like we have to really get a grip on what we're doing. And those of us who would much rather sit on the sidelines, I feel, have an obligation to begin to come out and start to say everything's kind of de-occulted at this point. You know, I mean, it's not that the secrets are out there, because even if they were, if you're not prepared for it, you will not understand them. But at this point, like, it's just all the history of these orders, the fact that they exist, you know, the famous people that have been a part of them, it's all out there. It's all out there. And people are going to start doing this stuff anyway. They already have. So I really felt an obligation to come out and start talking about it and setting the record straight, you know, and part of that is you have to, I think, responsibly adhere to some form of erudition. You can't just come out here and start talking about what you channeled, okay? Nobody gives a shit. It's not always helpful. It's rarely helpful, to be honest with you. Start talking about what you know, your personal interactions with with entities and spirits and things like that. You know, in esoteric circles, that's for you. That's for you. That message is for you. That lens is for your life.
For your
guidance. Exactly. It's not for you to start going around and waving a flag about, hey, look what I found out. So we have to adhere to what is historically viable in order to present this stuff with the context it requires for people to understand it. So, you know, that's why I do what I do. I got into this stuff almost by accident. Well, pretty much by accident. I've told the story before. You know, I'd always studied, I would say, the History Channel brand of occultism and Freemasonry, the Dan Brown kind of shit that's out there. And always was a huge, you know, independent student of comparative religions and things like that. And then one day, actually, my aunt had a tenant who threw herself in front of a train. And we went, she asked me and a friend of mine, hey, you know, this lady ended up being a hoarder. I haven't been down there since she moved in, and she was a horrific hoarder. So can you guys help me move some of this stuff? And we get there, and literally it's just piles and piles, you know, stacks of books and journals still wrapped in the cellophane from Barnes & Noble. So I saw this one book that jumped out at me as we're clearing the stuff. It was called The Oracle of Kabbalah by Richard Seidman. I still have it on my bookshelf. And I said to my aunt, like, this is pretty weird, but would it be cool if I just took this? And she's like, yeah, you know, whatever it doesn't get donated is going to get thrown out, so go ahead. So I read this book in one sitting, walking around my neighborhood. I put it down. I didn't, you know, I had studied some Kabbalah before. I wasn't, like, incredibly more educated. I didn't have incredible insights, but what happened was I had this deep feeling, this intuition that this is important. So I went on the yellow pages or white pages when people actually used to use those on the internet, and I searched Long Island Kabbalah Group because that's where I grew up in New York. And a guy's information came up. I contacted him. He said, well, we don't do that anymore, but there's this other thing. And that thing ended up being the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And I didn't know what it was. They told me it was a magical society. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. These people think they're doing like Harry Potter shit. They're out of their minds. So I kind of walked away. And my life, through a series of events, really brought me to my knees. And for some reason, after everything had fallen apart and there was almost nothing left, I kept getting this calling, like, you have to go back. You have to reapply. You have to get back in touch with them and petition. And I did. They gave me a second shot, even though I was a no-call, no-show for my first initiation. It was a real, you know, pulled a real millennial card on them. Total idiot flake. And the rest is history. I'm here, you know, I'm a temple chief. I run the temple here in Asheville, North Carolina, and been doing it for a long time. And it's just branched out into so many other types of organizations and practices.
That's such an interesting story, and I always find people's unique paths to these subjects, especially like the people who pursue actually being a part of an order, kind of just how the universe conspires or events conspire to lead you back to the place where you know, you're always hoping to go there. You've always been hoping for this. You've always been looking for this kind of thing, and I don't know. I feel like these paths in particular are prone to that. You never start realizing how many people might be into these subjects until you start talking about them. And they're arcane. You know, they are esoteric in the sense that most people just are not aware of them. But it's surprising when you start to just ask. When I was in Nashville and I wanted to become a Mason, I just started talking about it. And random scenarios with people I knew pretty well, where they're just like, oh, I'm a Mason, I'll sign your petition. I never would have known that had I not just asked. Again, the adage, knock and it'll be opened unto you. So the next question I have for really is at what is like the service that you're specifically providing here with Arcanum? And then I don't know if you want to get into the book specifically at all, but like what to these, when I talk about these things on my show, I'm trying to speak about them in a positive light. I'm talking about my positive experiences with them and just pointing people in the direction of those things. Yeah. What is your end goal with getting this information out there and ingestible to people in a normal way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That's the telos of it all, right? I guess that's the philosophical word for purpose. The purpose of it all. Well, I kind of assumed that I would have two streams of audience. I'd have the newcomer to this stuff, and I'd have the like a total beginner, not really knowing where to start. And I was also hoping that I would reach people who were a little more seasoned.
The old heads, yes.
Kind of. I knew a lot of the old hats. I'd done ritual with them, and we corresponded, and I agreed with a lot of those people. But there were people that had been getting involved, maybe like in I want to say 2015, 2016, all this, or even since 2020, since COVID and things like that. There was a lot of aesthetic that was pumped out into the mainstream that drew people towards this stuff. They began normalizing the aesthetic of the occult.
Yeah.
And so they felt safer around it because truly, society, particularly ours, it's just a system of pipelines, and it's almost like funneling, a herd in a certain direction with a shepherd's crook. It's society, the media, all that stuff. It's just the shepherd's crook.
Yeah.
But so when things like that begin to penetrate the mainstream, it's certainly no accident. And so they're beginning to Harry Potter, things like that. Even Game of Thrones. Normalizing this kind of stuff, D&D getting really, really kind of accepted and promulgated throughout the mainstream, through an adult mainstream, if you can believe it or not.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, D&D was for kids mostly.
Yeah, no, sure. But now celebrities are doing it. So.
Right, exactly. All this shit's super cool now, and there's a reason for that. But so these people that had kind of gotten interested in this stuff, I'd been following. I've been looking at like Reddit boards and things like that, and I'm seeing like there's like younger kids doing they're like really, really interested, right? Because the aesthetic hasn't been true to the inner core of the Western initiatic tradition. It has not accurately reflected the character of the Western esoteric tradition, which is specifically theurgic and initiatic. Theurgic meaning it's a spiritual alchemy. It's about spiritual ascent. But you wouldn't really be able to tell that based off of the aesthetic. The bait that they're using is very dark. It's very dark, it's very sinister, and it's almost used as a counter to something like, say, Christianity or mainstream religion. It's kind of we're offering you this other plate now, this other thing, this other meal for you, this other choice, this other option, and so it has to be diametrically opposed to those things. So it's there's a lot of it's more the dark aesthetic. So you see more of the people gravitating towards the dark parts of the occult. The occult it's just a way of. It's a method for discovering. It's a spiritual technology for discovering spiritual truths in the world. Now, just because something's spiritual doesn't mean it's good. It just means that it's supraphysical, and so or metaphysical. And like anything else, right? You could with science, you could I don't know, grow crops, or you could create the atom bomb. And it's the same thing with occultism. You can do good, you can do bad with it. And you just see people exercising this kind of therapeutic blasphemy against the popular religions or mainstream religions of their time, and going like just head first into dark forms of magic and things like that. Demonic evocation, chaos magic has its own issues, Goetia and all that stuff. And it's like no context. They have no context. They have no idea that there is a deeper purpose to this stuff, that where it came from, what it's trying to say. And so I wanted to reach those people too, and kind of say, look, listen, I'm going to not just tell you from my experience and share my insight emphatically. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the thread. Like, I'm going to go as far back as I possibly can in the historical record, and I'm going to show you what the texts say, and I'm going to show you that it's one continuous tradition. I'm going to prove this as much as possible, that this is not what it's about. The shit you're doing is not what this stuff is about. But most people do not have the resources to be able to be educated on the occult. And you've got the orders on one side that are saying, and I'm a member of them, I'm an administrator of some of them, and they're saying like, well, they should join the order and find out. It's not always feasible. And you can't just let people, I feel I had to step in and at least, I have no delusions that I'm going to, be able to help a tremendous amount of people, but at least I'll be the guy that's trying to wave the flag and say, no, the bridge is out ahead. You pull over, turn around. Yeah. So that's really what I'm trying to do here. But I have to be erudite about it. I have to be scholarly about it. But the thing is that I have to give you my insight.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the niche that I feel like I'm fulfilling here, is that I'm not only going to give you, scholarly stuff, I'm also going to give you the insight behind it. Like why does divination work? What is a spirit? Is it energy? Is it just a spirit? Is it this objective thing? What is it? So those questions I feel qualified to be able to, if not completely definitively answer, comment on in a way that I think will give people a lot of context. And that's really what I'm hoping to do, is just particularly even with the book, for people that are getting into this, I want to show them the way that is not only contextually aligned with the history of this for thousands of years, but provides a way to avoid the potential pitfalls. Because if you engage in this stuff and you think it's not dangerous, then you don't really believe in it.
And, begs the question, why are you even playing around with it? I feel like this was something me and my friends would talk about a lot, like the misappropriation of occult imagery, definitely, and like band merch and all the stuff as we were kids. Like, I just remember seeing it and just, that's why today occult has there's even darkness associated. If you look at the definition of occult, there's nothing sinister about it. It's just less known, but there's this whole idea that, to look at these symbols or to in any way behave that way is, because Christianity and Islam and Judaism have kind of dominated world religion. So of course, they wanted to vilify the thing that they got all their practices from.
Right.
But, when I told this story last weekend on the podcast, but it's relevant here. When I was joining my lodge in Tennessee, I remember a couple of the guys being like, okay, we have to make this digestible for local folks. Like, there has to be some involvement from local folks, because if there isn't, they'll burn this building down. And it took me probably a year to understand what that meant. But even just reading the history of as Christianity is becoming the big religion and we're taking all the practices from paganism to get the pagans to become Christians. I feel like there is like an element of it in order for people to get down to the core of the shit, which is heady at a level that I do not claim to understand completely. I don't know. There has to be like a little bit of, there has to be a gate. That's a step. There has to be some kind of bridge, kind of like you're saying, the bridge is out. The bridge is out. There is no bridge right now. Right now it's I think most people's understanding of anything occult would be Illuminati and it would be fucking Jay-Z. You know what I mean? Like that's how it has entered into the masses, and sadly that's where it's been for a while.
Yeah.
What do you think are like the biggest on top of all of these orders needing more people to be members, what do you think is the big struggle in today's social environment to getting people interested in this information? Is it just too arcane for people? Do they have too many things going on in their day life to want to spend an hour a day looking into this subject? What do you think it is?
Well, the thing for me is that I'm seeing a tremendous interest in this comparatively. Compared to the last 15, 20 years, people now are more interested in it than ever, and academia as well. Like the academy across the world is becoming more of me. I'm speaking at Oxford in September. I never thought that would happen. I don't have college degrees. I'm not a professor, but the qualified people are being brought out to speak in universities. They're teaching courses. There are entire degree tracks now that you can get. I don't know what the enrollment numbers look like, but I find that the biggest issue that people have is contextual. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like we're sort of born almost with what I like to call perceptual software. Our hardware are the five senses, right? But our software, we're running a program. And a lot of that comes into us immediately from family, from schools, right? The sort of mandating of national education institutions.
Or just obedience, even just the concept of obedience.
Exactly. Intellectual obedience.
Yeah, definitely.
But the thing is too, children need guidance, and it's kind of taken advantage of. They need guidance in a couple of different ways, because they need to be, a child, in order for it to be safe, must be a certain level of obedient. Kids running around in the street, gonna get hit by a car. You have to listen to your parents, but you have to also be encouraged towards a healthy amount of curiosity, a healthy amount of questioning things, just in general. People say question authority. Well, in order to question authority, you have to be able to question everything.
Right.
Because the thing is, if somebody tells you, some scientific fact about how, atoms are vibrating and this desk that I'm sitting at is not actually still the way I perceive it. If I'm not going to question, if I can't question what I'm seeing, then I'm probably not even going to question this person. You know what I'm saying? If this is the first time I'm consuming this information, you need to develop inquisitiveness. That's the characteristic of human intelligence: creativity and curiosity. And so we need to be able to find a way to be creative at a young age and be curious at a young age, and also obedience comes into play. Yeah, you know, in order for safety, you have to rely on your parents, but that shouldn't be abused, and I think it's abused. And it might be well-meaning, right? Because the parent they think they're doing everything that they can for their child,
but ultimately it's traumatizing them in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't really know. You know, I can't speak to a lot of the psychological professional vernacular because I'm not a psychologist. I see a lot of people throwing psychological terms around. Part of me tends to think that's being weaponized against us, is the consumption and wielding freely of psychological vernacular without any actual context. But I think for sure it's training. It's definitely training people because, and here's the thing that nobody wants to admit, human beings are ultimately programmable. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? We call it learning.
Yeah, they really don't want to admit that.
It's like we call it learning. Yeah, everybody else is programmed except for me, right? You know, like so
everyone else is a sheep. Yeah, of course.
Exactly, and that's ultimately this perceptual software that I'm talking about is your programming, and you've got to be programmed to wonder. But the program that we should be installing is one of curiosity and creativity, rather than this program of you don't need to question things because, you know, the immediacy of life is it requires your full attention. You need to work. You need to make money. You need to pass your grades. You know, it's like a series of carrots that you must chase. And you know, the ability to become creative is almost like luck. You know, you have to have time. You have to have somebody to teach you oftentimes how to not only retain your creativity, but to develop it. You know, I'm a musician. And so I spent a really long time developing creativity to great expense in my personal life. You know, it was broke forever, but still I developed this ability to think. And I think a lot of times is that even when people go and look at the information, the perceptual software is preventing them from understanding it. And that to me is the biggest thing. So you'll walk away. You know, you'll either dismiss it as blasphemous or you'll just be like, I don't understand it. You know, and people have, depending on who you are, you have different reactions. Somebody be like, I don't understand it. That's fair. Maybe not for me. And somebody else will go, I don't understand it, so it's evil or wrong.
I hate it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's to me is the biggest problem with humanity right now, is the fact that we all are running programming that is preventing us from looking deeply into anything. You know, like, so it's almost like software that is, it's got this protection. You know, the software doesn't want you to run any other kind of software. You know, that's my issue, because I do see people coming to this stuff more often, at least in the place where I am. And but the issue is they're very apt to go the, you know, rock and roll edgy way,
of course,
because that's fun and that's cool and it'll make you look sexy.
Dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and dark and mysterious. Really, it's just you're not learning anything about yourself. You're just piling more bullshit on. So good luck. But you know, and then the other route is, yeah, like you're saying, people look at it and they're like, this is evil, or I don't get this, or so there's a lot of work to be done, and part of the contextual, that's part of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to contextually, historically reframe this for people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love it. Just not to talk about the little thing you made about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, that great two-part series, but just the fucking detail. I've watched so many things. I've read so many articles. And I heard new shit in there that I've never heard about. Just the level of detail. And I know it exists. You know, a couple episodes, I had Ronnie Pontiac on, and he was talking about his book, American Metaphysical Traditions.
Love him.
And he's just fucking blowing my mind every 5 minutes with this new tale about some very established, you know, iconic American person who is deep into metaphysics of some kind, or some metaphysical order that had like a huge following. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's nuts. And again, like we were talking about before, it's kind of uniquely baked into the American experience in a way that it isn't baked into I mean, even France or the UK, you know. But I'm interested to know kind of your thoughts on that and you know, where it is, how we got here.
Yeah, you know, it's just different, really. First of all, I love Ronnie. He's you know, world-class
he's
scholar
the best.
when it comes to this kind of stuff, and he's a friend. But that's one of the most fun parts of learning about this history, and one of the ways in which I'm able to, I think, really find the detail is my inquisitiveness. I don't settle for the first answer. You know, there's a lot of, that's what I see. I see a lot of that stuff out there. People doing this stuff wrong. For instance, I just want to use an example. You know, some people will talk about like the early founders of the Golden Dawn, and they'll try and explain the Golden Dawn through the rituals that we have today. They'll say, oh, you know, they're interpreting their writings on the Golden Dawn, or what have you. Whatever order it is, whatever it is. It's just kind of an example of the type of things people do. They'll talk about, okay, you know, and then in this part, this happens, and, you know, he must have been talking about this in his poetry. But then they don't realize, like, the rituals that are available now weren't available. They were different rituals. They've been updated. They've been modified. So you see a lot of that kind of shoddy research that's just like it amounts to nothing because it's based on a fallacy. You got this wrong. You got this wrong because you didn't think to ask yourself, are these the same rituals? You can't take anything for granted when you're doing history. You just can't. You have to trust but verify. You have to constantly verify the trail that you're on and verify, okay, do I have this contextually correct? Because there's so many people and so many channels out there that are just running with this false interpretation. But so that's really why I love Ronnie's work, because he's really, 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 really erudite. He knows how to do research, and he knows how to write about it wonderfully. Yeah. But when you do begin to look at the history of the United States, yeah, absolutely, it's the history of the occult. It's been whitewashed out. You can't even imagine. I mean, I'm sure you could, because if you've read American Metaphysical Religion, you know, or if you've done any independent research yourself, you cannot imagine how much a part of mainstream life was, you know, involved with this stuff. The Theosophical Society, spiritualism, anthroposophy, Freemasonry. People tend to think this is like a peripheral thing. You know, we're on the fringes of society. The music you love, the art you love, the stories you love, all that shit, it was made by some kind of magician, most likely, influenced by these societies, some form of occultist. Yeah. So really, when you look at this stuff, it's not just the history of this weird fringe thing. It's the hidden history of the Western, at least, world. Now, I understand what you're saying about, you know, it's exclusive. It's kind of baked into the American experience, and it is, right? Because not as many as is commonly believed, but many of the people involved with the founding of this country were Freemasons. And the Freemasonic Network was used to organize in a subterfugic way to, you know, keep the messages secret and have successful surprise guerrilla warfare. I mean, one of my favorite stories is the Boston Tea Party. That was a Masonic lodge. They dressed up as natives. And then went there, because they could organize in secret in the lodge, and they knew people would keep their mouths shut. Anyways, I'm sorry, continue. I mean, that's still alive today. You know that? It might have been reconstructed, but the order that they were a part of, the Freemasonic sort of like chapter, it's still alive in this country. Oh, that specific one? That's in incredible. The South. Yeah, it's still you can still take those degrees if you can find somebody that's in it and tap you on the shoulder. So awesome. Yeah, really cool. But yes, but also that was also the case in France during this period of revolution, and it was also the case, you know, in during the Bolshevik Revolution. I mean, that's one of the reasons why people didn't like Freemasons, was that they,
We're always involved.
Yeah, they were always involved, but also like people make the mistake of thinking because it looks Freemasonic, they're Freemasons. Take the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, for example, right? Adam Weishaupt and all that stuff. People tend to think, oh, they were free. He created the Illuminati based on Masonic tenets. It was completely non-Masonic. It was never considered Masonic. And then he went and encouraged everybody that was in his little group to penetrate into Freemasonic lodges and circles so that they could have greater control over society and also blend in with the intellectual, an esoteric kind of elite of the time. So a lot of people make that mistake too, of thinking that the actual Bavarian Illuminati were Masonic. They were never Masonic, never ever Masonic. But they looked Masonic because they had the same thing.
Close enough.
You can't come in. We got our handshakes. Yeah, exactly. So, but you see a lot of this stuff in the history of the West, and one of the reasons why we don't understand is because after the Enlightenment, it started taking a different shape. It started taking, like, if I were to say to you right now, like, Plato, the Platonic Dialogues are for the West the textbook of all Western occultism and Western esotericism, you'd probably shake your head and be like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But they are. They are. I'm doing a whole course on it now. I'm doing a lecture series covering what's called the Iamblichian curriculum of the Platonic Dialogues. Because you go to school and they teach you Plato, and somebody's over your shoulder telling you about how you need to interpret it. And all these crazy, highly specific, philosophically sort of vernacular, these words, these Greek terms, and you're overwhelmed, and it seems ridiculous, seems absurd. The teacher's telling you they're about logic, and you're reading it, and none of it appears logical. Well, that's because they're not. You're being taught this stuff from somebody who has a worldview, right? A perceptual software that is antithetical to what the dialogues are talking about. Socrates says he has a spirit that communicates with him and tells him not to do things. You're not going to learn that in school. It's in the dialogues. You got to read it. You got to read it for yourself. Plato's talking about metaphysics. He's talking about spirituality. He's talking about in the Republic. Book 10 of the Republic, there's like a 5 pages called The Myth of He talks about a at least 2,500-year-old near-death experience about this guy leaving his body and then leaving the universe. And then for the next, 1,500 years, that model is the model everyone looks at as the way the universe is. That's their science. Their scientific view of the universe comes from that dialogue.
That's crazy.
People don't get it. They don't have the context. I'm here to teach you. I'm here to show you how far back this goes. This is a history of the world. It's not just the history of a bunch of guys that meet in these clandestine or these secret lodges. It changes after the Enlightenment because it has to hide. Plato didn't have to hide. It has to hide after the Enlightenment. Right. Not just because of Christianity, because a lot of this stuff was being done by Christian priests, but also because academia was starting to say, they used to study astrology. They used to study, alchemy. You used to be able to study what we call arcane sciences. Around the Enlightenment and after that, they were like, this stuff is bullshit. And as the famous scholar Walter Hanegraaff has recently said, all that knowledge got kicked into the dustbin.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is true, and it's definitely something that I've been kind of harping on recently. This is the history of the world. This is how messages were carried down. This is the shit. They chiseled this shit in stone for a fucking reason. It's that important, and it's survived that long because it needed to, and it's a testament to it's a testament to the fact that these ancient ideas and concepts are still hyper relevant. Not only did they help us shape our worldview, how we view reality, alchemy becomes chemistry. A lot of this stuff becomes psychology. These were the sciences before we had the means to measure the science. I even when you point that out to people, even when you give them specific examples, most of them are still willing to kick it in the trash bin. But that's also fine. I mean, even at my lodge, or any lodge that I went to, I get maybe 10% of the guys that wanted to talk about this. And rightfully so. 90% want to just be there and hang out and have dinner and catch up with the guys and not really get into a heady portion of the conversation. But, is it always just that? Is this a thing where only no more than 10% of the population, wherever you are going to be into it because it requires extra effort? It requires reading. It requires analysis, comparing these two mystery schools and kind of seeing where the overlap is. That's not necessarily easy shit. You've been working at it for a decade plus. I've been working at it for a decade plus. I'm nowhere, anywhere near any of the people that I learned it from,
Yeah, I mean, at least 20 years at this point. But it's the thing is, I don't know. I don't want to sound elitist because I think it's inherent in all. This is a spiritual birthright for all people, but I don't think everybody's going to get to it in this lifetime. I think periods like this, for the world, are initiatic periods. Now, everybody says, a lot of people that are interested in the occult and want to get involved, they're like, oh, he's an initiate. I know an initiate. I want to be initiated. And they think it's like the ultimate. But what does that word mean? It means to begin. Initiate means to begin.
No one wants that.
It doesn't mean that like you're the guy. You just started. You decided to get on the road. And so you don't, in Freemasonic lodges, people think we're certainly not talking about esotericism when the lodge is open. There might be one table at dinner that's talking about, esotericism kind of in a veiled way. But like you're saying, most of these people, most of these men approach it from a very mundane way, and that has its own history.
And rightfully so. Again, like if that's how you want to experience the club, like you're more than entitled to.
You are. I think it's a mistake in the interpretation of the telos of the organization because you didn't really have that until. I'll put it this way: you did not have non-philosophical lodges until the Joiner period.
Yeah.
The period between World War I and World War II, and the period immediately following World War II, where everybody came home, the baby boomers had tons of kids, everybody wanted to join Else Club, Rotary Club. It was all about joining. And they call that the Joiner period in American history. It was all about community and neighborhood. And so it went from being an esoteric, meaning like secret knowledge kind of, or at least I will say highly philosophical knowledge, and it went to be completely exoteric, which is just like, it's great because we do a lot of charity and there's it's a place for men to bond where that doesn't really exist in our society anymore. And I think there's a reason they're trying to vilify Masons and push us out, is because society doesn't seem to want to have men to they don't want to have anybody really bonding anymore, and coming together in any kind of unity that isn't directly hostile to another group, right? Freemasons are it's just a band of brothers that are trying to do good things in the world. So likely, I would say that's probably why in the last. Although there's a long history of anti-Masonic sentiment, but it's definitely been blown up in the last maybe 5 or 10 years and stuff like that. I mean, I went in to go do a podcast at my lodge, and there was a brick thrown right through the window.
Jesus Christ!
Somebody was shot and killed, I think, in either Tennessee or Kentucky a couple months ago. The Scottish Rite
at a lodge.
Walking out of the lodge, he was walking home. Somebody walked up to him and killed him. There was or I should say unalived him, right? Since we're on YouTube, but,
whatever.
But and then there was an explosion in the Scottish Rite in Athens. Somebody exploded that. So but so there's an anti-Masonic furor right now, but it's I don't know. It's people are afraid of things that contradict or challenge their programming, that challenge
Absolutely,
the interface that they're using. You know, so because the process of initiation itself, and I think some people intuit this and are scared of it, but the process of initiation itself is to challenge the software, to challenge the programming. The main thing about initiation is that it is going to take you apart. It's alchemical. It's supposed to be alchemical in the Western tradition. And I say Western because I'm not an expert on the Eastern tradition. I've seen systems, absolutely. Taoist alchemy, absolutely. That's also an alchemical path. But I'm more qualified to speak on this stuff. And in these traditions, you know, it's about taking the self apart, examining it, you know, correcting, really strengthening the weaknesses as much as they can be, and purifying or balancing the strong parts, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're really, really good at even something that's beneficial. Too much of anything is not a good thing. So initiation is trying to get you towards this dynamic equilibrium of balance, right? Because nothing's ever going to be completely static here. Stasis in the material realm is an illusion. But instead of, you know, wavering like this, going to extremes, initiation will help you, you know, kind of tighten that sine wave, you know, and you'll be able to sort of counterbalance. And so a lot of people, they don't want to do that work. It's painful work.
Yeah, they sure don't.
Painful work.
Yeah, it's this is supposed to be my fun in my free time.
Yeah, exactly.
Not work. I don't want to do work.
This is supposed to make people, you know, scratch their heads when I post a picture of the Masonic Lodge on my Facebook with no caption. You know, it's supposed to be really cool and edgy, and you know. But then you get in, and I remember when the thought hit me. You know, I got into the Golden Dawn, and I went back and I started reading about tarot, and you know. Just kind of adopting that lifestyle and those aesthetics. I never went dark, but still that aesthetic, that Masonic aesthetic, the mahogany bookcases, leather chairs.
Yeah, sure.
And then I remember it hit me where I'm like, oh, okay. So in order to actually be an initiate, I have to stop playing the occultist. You know. That's a difficult thing for people to have to think about. Do I want to? It's like for anybody that's ever seen the movie The Departed, you know, I use it because it's a pop. I'm probably dating myself, but it's a pop culture reference. There's a scene where, for anybody that's seen the movie, where Martin Sheen is talking to Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He's trying to figure out if he's, you know, going to be corrupt or not, but he wants to join the police force. And he goes, "Do you want to be a cop? Or do you want to appear to be a cop?" And I mean, that's the question every initiate should be asking themselves. Do I want to be an initiate, or do I want to appear to be an initiate? You know, that's the heart of it, you know, because if you're not doing that inner work, it's just a place for you to be. I know for a fact that's not why we have Western initiation.
Well, I mean, it's a lonely road, and I think a lot of people think they're going to become a Mason, and then whatever they're going to tell them who killed JFK, they're going to get keys to a Ferrari. I don't know what most people's like interpretation of that was, but I got it pretty quick. Like, oh, this is a solo path, and most of the shit that I'm interested in, most of those books, I can actually go read. I don't need to be a Mason to go read them, but the context of the system of symbols and cipher and code, understanding that might make me be able to understand the shit that I read out there. But I knew very early on, and I was lucky. My lodge had in Tennessee, it had a ton of guys who were into this stuff, and a lot of them were really helpful in pointing me in the right direction. But they were also people that were like, we're not going to do shit for you. This is all on you. If you want to get something out of this, you have to make it your own, you know? Right. And that's hard work. Yeah, that's hard work. People don't want to do the hard work.
Exactly. Everybody seems to want some sort of, you know, no pun intended, but a magic bullet.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the first things I tell people is that, this stuff is, even if you join something highly esoteric, something that's quintessentially magical, working with the occult, or that word occultus in Latin means hidden from the eye. That's all that word means. It's unfortunate that it has the word cult in it, but occultus just means hidden from the eye. So when you're working in magical societies, you're just working with forces that you cannot observe with your eye.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. But it's got the root oculus, eye, in there. That's oculus is the Latin for eye. So occultus means specifically hidden from the eyes. So it's just stuff you can't see, but you can't see radio waves. You can't see. You can see the effects of the air, but you can't see the air. So it's just a more sophisticated version of that. And so, it's like people that think they're going to get involved with those forces and it's going to solve all their problems are sorely, mistaken.
Yeah.
So, because what really initiation is calling you to do is redress the ledger of life, balance the things you have not balanced. You have to go back, and there is no magic bullet. Truly, you have to look at yourself. You have to look at what has happened, what you have done. A lot of people like to think of themselves as good people because they haven't done anything bad. But you have to ask yourself,
how much good have you done?
What causes for good have you set in motion?
Yeah.
And be honest about that.
Yeah, it's most people don't want to do that because the numbers are low.
I don't blame them.
Nobody likes that kind of self-analysis. Yes, but I agree. It was one of my favorite parts of the process is just the focus on looking to death to appreciate life,
Right.
Understanding my mortality and understanding that what I do have right now is a luxury of time and I need to be capitalizing on that. Before we end the first hour, I want to talk for at least 10 or 15 minutes about your book and kind of what it is, what you're trying to say with the book specifically, and what your plans are beyond this one.
Sure. So the book is called A Formless Fire. It's A Formless Fire. The subtitle is Rediscovering the Magical Traditions of the West. It's being put out July 31st on Tria Prima Press. Tria Prima, they've done an incredible job curating a series of books and releases that are Masonic. They're all brethren. All the authors and the brothers who run the company, but a lot of this stuff is very accessible. In fact, that's kind of that's it. That's kind of what they do is they create content that is accessible outside of Masonry, but also very apropos to Masonry. So the book itself is a tome, about 138,000 words, close to 400 pages. But what I've done is I've tried to compile and organize the different aspects of the Western tradition so that you can open a chapter and say, okay, I want to learn about alchemy today. Its history, its theory, its practice. I'm going to open this chapter. You're on the alchemy chapter. I'm going to learn about astrology today. Its history, its theory, its practice.
That's awesome.
I'm going to open this chapter today. I want to learn about Freemasonry. I want to learn about Rosicrucianism. I want to learn about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Its history, its theory, its practice. It's all there. And there's a series of 8 appendices or appendixes, which are kept at the back of the book. That there's, you can go into those. There's practical rituals with commentary. There's a preparation of an alchemical spagyric medicine that's on there, a spagyric preparation. I'm not a doctor or anything, but I practice alchemy, and I actually had an extremely knowledgeable and well-practiced alchemist, help me with that recipe. There's all sorts of practical stuff that you can apply this stuff to, but at the same time, you're going to get a really, really good, realistic, historical context of where this stuff comes from, and you're going to get the insight of how and why it works. As much as anyone can definitively be able to talk about that. And that's not a cop-out. Read the book. Read the book and you'll see that there's a mechanism behind everything, and it's a lot more accessible, I think. It's a lot more realistic and believable than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people just think it's like hocus pocus, Harry Potter wand waving stuff. That's not really what we do. That book, like I said, July 31st, I'm sold out of pre-orders, but it'll be available on the Tria Prima website via Shopify and Lulu. It'll eventually go up on Amazon, but as you know, Amazon, the authors don't make any scratch from that.
Yeah, for sure.
So we prefer it if you buy it on the website, triaprima.com. Other than that, my website is ikebaker.com. You can get access to my blog. You can get access to the latest video of the Arcanum documentary series, which is the second part of the history of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. You can get access to all my podcasts, other presentations and podcasts that I've been on, etc. So that's there. I finished another book. I wrote 2 books at once, which was a lot. But there's another one that's coming out next year that is much more about a practical system of Western energy work that should accompany a ceremonial practice or an alchemical practice, whatever it is that you do that might be esoteric. This is going to amplify and augment your practice. That's coming out next year. In the meantime, I am speaking August 16th, 17th, and 18th at the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Conference in Vermont. September 5th, 6th, and 7th, I'm speaking at the Creative Bridges Conference at Oxford University in London. September 27th to the 28th, I'm giving the keynote address at the Esotericism in Freemasonry Conference out in Seattle, Washington, that Troy Sprue puts on every year for the last 8 years. It's a fantastic Masonic and esoteric conference. And then in October 24th to the 27th, I'm co-organizing and I co-founded the New Hermopolis Conference. We're taking the top scholars and academics in the world. Walter Hanegraaff, Shannon Grimes, Gregory Shaw, Professor Charles Stang, who is the head of the Harvard Center for the Study of World Religions, and many others, along with some of the top practitioners, the top practicing people in the fields of alchemy, astrology, ceremonial magic, etc. We're gathering them together for a 4-day symposium in the desert of Egypt at the New Hermopolis Eco Village that Dr. Mervat Abdel Nasser founded 15 years ago. It's very remote, so we won't be doing any on-site audience, but we will be streaming the proceedings of the conference for everybody. And the last day, we're all taking a group trip to the ruins of Hermopolis Magna, which was the Hellenistic city of the scholars and magicians in ancient Egypt. Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And so I got my hands tied until really November.
That's amazing, though. It's super cool to just kind of like see that there is this much interest, in the sense that there are multiple places that you're speaking about and multiple organizations that are really trying to get. I have kind of like a strange thesis. I feel like in times of great turmoil, people turn to these things. Like that's why there was the stacking of joining around the world wars. I imagine if we went back in history, at least in modern civilized culture, people looking to esoteric or occult traditions to get some kind of peace. And I really hope that people... The reason I'm trying to push more of this out there is because I want people to look to this as a means to internal peace instead of succumbing to whatever the news is trying to make you behave like. And from my opinion, it seems like they're really trying to dial up the fear and anxiety. So the more you can control the mental waves that are occurring in here, or at least how you respond to them, I found these traditions to be super helpful for me. Many other people have as well. And you're feeling a little overcome with the insanity of the times. People wrote about it a long time ago. Ancients were giving you the tools to kind of deal with this shit in at a similar scale. All you got to do is get out there and look. We're going to wrap up the first hour. We'll kick it over to the second hour on Patreon. But Ike, dude, thank you so much again for coming on here and talking with my audience, kind of giving them a much more detailed overview of this subject. Is there any other things you want to say about these subjects? Or I'm going to have links to all your stuff in the bio, but if there's any other specific thing you want people to check out, what do you want to say?
I just want to thank you, man, for having me on. I feel like, I feel like you've been an easy friend. And so I'm looking forward to diving deeper in your work, and hopefully maybe we can get you on the Arcane podcast. You can come have a conversation with me.
Happy to, anytime. I'd love that. Well, you heard it here, folks. First, folks, I'm gonna join Ike on his show at some point in the future, and we're definitely gonna cook up some more. I've been thinking about some other ideas, like specific deep dives to have you go on in future episodes. But again, check out Arcanum, check out his site, check out the book when it comes out. I'll have links to all that stuff in the bio. And if you want to hear more about wherever this conversation is going to go on the Patreon, you just got to join us there. This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, folks. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you in a bit.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. Literally no one cares. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.